good morning. Thank you for agreeing to participate in this oral history project. Could we start by you giving us your full name, please?
My full name is Celestino Rivera.
Okay. And what is your heritage?
I'm Puerto Rican descent.
Okay. How long have you been in Lorain, Ohio?
I was born here in 1949, and the only time I ever left is I served in the military between 66 and 1968 and 69, and other than that I returned home and I've been here ever since. Yeah.
Tell me about your community. Tell me about growing up here in Lorain, Ohio as a Puerto Rican.
Well, my dad came from Puerto Rico. He come from the central mountainous areas of Puerto Rico. He was recruited by a company, S.G. Friedman, out of Pittsburgh, and they had been hired by the National Tube. And it was kind of a controlled invitation. They had to be able to speak and write Spanish. They had to have police checks. They had to have a letter of reference. It was primarily white Puerto Ricans. And that was the original 200. They came here. The first group came like October, November of 1947. My father came with the second group, January 1948. He brought my mother over in 1949, and we've been here, ever since. He came here, and at that time they lived in the company barracks inside the steel plant. It was rather cold, unfriendly, worked extremely long hours in those hot conditions, and it was I lost part of my heritage, to be real honest with you. In my case, my mother died when I was 5, and they took my brothers and sisters away from my dad, and they sent us over to Parma, Ohio, in a Catholic orphanage. So I spent about 6 years in a Catholic orphanage over there in Parma, called Parmadale. And during that time I kind of lost my heritage. When I went in, I was 5 years old. I didn't speak any English. When I came out, I didn't speak any Spanish anymore, and really had no connectivity to my culture at all. When we came back out, they put us with my father for a short time, who had a lot of problems with alcohol and other issues. They took us away again a couple months later, and they put us in foster homes. So I grew up in foster homes, and but I can tell you that during that time, I came back out. I think I was 11 or 12, and I felt this resentment towards my own heritage, because I ended up in. First of all, I had a father who I couldn't understand. He didn't speak English. He never learned to speak English. The foster parents I went to live with also spoke Spanish, and I had a hard time adjusting to that change from the tight-knit Catholic orphanage, and they separated my brothers and sisters. So I was kind of obsessed with that, and didn't appreciate the culture that I was back into. And I got to tell you that I don't know that I even spent any time or any effort to reconnect. I didn't want to, and I walked out of school when I was 16, and I joined the military on my 17th birthday. And so I left with the U.S. Army, and I served in Germany. I later served in Vietnam, and when I returned from Vietnam in 1969, I got a call that my father, who had moved back to Puerto Rico, was dying, and so eventually we went back, and my father had died. But what happened there was I got to spend a month with my real family for the first time. I met uncles and aunts and that I had never known, and I got to visit the island from one end to the other, and I really had an opportunity to have some idea who I am. This is where I came from. This is, and it was the first time in my life that I had experienced that. And what I loved about it the most was the people themselves. They just had so much joy, and they laughed, and their work ethic, and their love and their humility, the pride they had, and just the strength that they had, and I just for the first time felt so connected that from that point on, it's really the essence of who I am, and it has guided me pretty much the rest of my life. I came back, I started studying Spanish. religiously. I read every book I could about the history of Puerto Rico, and then continued that into the history of Mexico and the history of Latin America. And it's pretty much, I can say, it's the essence of who I am. You know, and
Do you speak Spanish fluently now?
well, I can speak, I can have a conversation for sure, and I can read it, and you know, so which is a big improvement from when I was 21. You know, I didn't speak at all, and so from that point on, I spent a lot of time. Well, first of all, when I came back, I was going to school and I was working, and I decided to become a police officer, and I became a police officer. It was partly for that reason. I mean, it was influenced by my culture and the need to help my people, and I thought it was easier to do that from inside as opposed to from the outside. And when I came back, I got involved in a lot of social issues, including the farm movement and a lot of other things. And I went to Fremont and Findlay as they were starting to organize flock with Baltimore, you know. And but throughout my career, I don't know if you want me to keep going on or.
No,
okay. Throughout my career, there have been times, many years, that I probably spent more time in the community than I did on my job, you know, and so I was part of a lot of things. You know, we have a social service agency called El Centro, and I played a role, you know, I was on their board for many years, and I was one of the founders of CHIP, which is an advocacy organization. I was, you know, one of the founders of the Hispanic Fund, which is a philanthropic, you know, and scholarship fund. You know,
so you've been a part of many different organizations geared towards helping or organizing in some way the Latino community in Lorain. Tell me about your role as a police officer, as a chief of police at this moment, and what you see in the community. What has been your role as police?
As a police officer.
Yeah. And your work with the Latino community. I guess, and it's a broad question. It could be also what you've seen, some of the challenges that you've seen, some of the success stories that you've seen.
Okay. When I first started in the police department, this police department was a little different than it is today. This was a pretty rough city back in the 60s and 70s, and it was a rough police department, and I found that just uncomfortable at the time, and wondering if that was the appropriate role for myself.
Were you the first?
No, there was two. When I got on, there was we had a Mexican-American officer, and we also had another Puerto Rican officer, and so my first role, I felt, was to act as a liaison between the law enforcement in this city and the community, because there wasn't a great relationship. It was the end of the 60s, early 70s. It was anti-law enforcement, anti-war, anti-government environment. And so I saw my role as going out to the community and showing the human side of being a police officer. And also what I found myself doing for years was just helping individuals. I mean, they would come to my house, they would contact my sisters and my brothers. And so I was kind of like their liaison when they felt uncomfortable or afraid to come to the police. They would come to my house. And so I did that for many, many years. I didn't have any particular problems with my fellow officers. I didn't find that I experienced any kind of discrimination. And the city's a statutory city, so every position is tested, including chief of police. And so I was able to get promoted, and there was never any barriers to that. You know, I went to school and did well in tests, so there was never any barrier with that. What I've dealt with over the years is where we've had incidents where the community has become on edge, you know, and I was always able to go there and calm things down. And so, but at the same time, at that time I was living in South Lorain, which was primarily where our community is located. Not anymore, but at that time, you know. And I went to Sacred Heart Church, which is a Latino church, and you know, I was on the board of El Centro, the social service agency. So I was very visible in the community, and so I think I was able to, you know, to bridge that gap, you know, that existed. As far as now, the biggest problem I see, and the one that I'm directly involved in, is the undocumented. I got invited to Sacred Heart for a meeting, and they asked me to be at this meeting, and then so I asked Father, I said, okay, what do you want me to talk about? Thinking kind of an arrogance, I thought he wanted me to talk to them. And he says, no, they don't want you to talk, they want you to listen. And they want to hold you accountable. And I says, hold us accountable for what, Father? Yeah. And he says, they want to hold you accountable for breaking up families. And I said, Father, we don't do that. And he goes, no, actually you do. And so I went to the meeting and I got greeted with signs, about 125 people with signs, which was really odd for me to be on this side of that. But I stayed there for about 2 or 3 hours, and I listened to their about 11 testimonials. And it was really heartbreaking. And what I found is that we had a couple of officers that were taking it on their own and who had friends with ICE or Border Patrol that was detaining people and calling them up and holding them for an hour and a half, 2 hours until they got there, and not typing reports on it or doing anything like that. And so I felt very embarrassed and ashamed that we played any role in breaking up these families. And so since that time, which was about 2 years ago, I've been completely involved in that issue. And that night driving home, I drive about 45 minutes to get home, gave me time to reflect, and I had trouble sleeping, and so I got up at 4 in the morning, and by the time I got to work at 8 in the morning, I had a new policy that says we never, ever, ever use that as a basis for stopping anybody, and we never, ever call federal agencies, so we put that in place the next morning, and since that time I go to court with them. I just am totally immersed. In fact, it's the only issue that I'm immersed in right now. And so I think that's, right now I would say that's the biggest problem facing not only us as a law enforcement agency or as a city, but the entire country. I think it's something we need to be very ashamed of, and we need to correct.
Absolutely.
So.
So that, I mean,
I don't know if I'm going to say, I feel kind of nervous. I haven't felt nervous for a long time.
So, I mean, I think what you just told me is like a difficult story, but also a success story, sort of moving forward and addressing some of those needs in the community. Can you tell me about something else that has happened in the community that is sort of where people have come together? What have you witnessed, or what have you participated in that has had to do with this sort of coming together, helping each other, or?
Yeah, I think that our community here in Lorain, I don't know that it's unique. I've had the opportunity to work with Latinos in other cities, and sometimes what I find is that there's a lot of friction, and a lot of egos. I think we were blessed that the people who came here, the Mexicans who came here in 1923, the Puerto Ricans that came here in 1947, 48, really did lead the way. Most of them were uneducated, yet they had this tremendous ability to organize. I know that within a very short time, Vine Avenue, which was a business district, it's not there anymore, but it was a business district, that they had all Latino businesses, but it wasn't only just bodegas or stores and restaurants. It was clothing stores, it was barbers, it was just a whole thriving and dynamic place. They had organizations to help each other like almost immediately. They had the Puerto Rican home, they had clubs that were based on hometowns, like Club Cuarmeño, Club Utuado, Club San Lorenzo, Casa de Lares, Club Benefico, which was really only for the benefit of helping others. And they got to the point where within a couple of years they had councilmen in the city. They were politically organized. They began a church, Sacred Heart, that thrives to this day. So I think they gave us that foundation. The Mexican community had Mexican American Citizenship Club, GI Forum. They had Mexican Mutual. These, I don't know, I call them those viejos, but they just really built a foundation in a sense of service to each other that I think our generation followed through. Yeah. It's diminishing a little bit today, with the next generation.
My next question is you're mentioning setting that foundation from the elders, and then your generation sort of following or having that model and continuing it.
Right.
You don't see the same in this today's generation, the younger generation.
I'm just starting to see a little bit of renewal of it, but I can tell you that for probably 20 years, it hasn't been there. That many of the people who benefited from those organizations and the organizations that we started, which were like El Central Social Service Agency, CHIP, as an advocacy organization, the Hispanic Fund, which helps with scholarships and philanthropic, but also they had the Lorain Hispanic Business Chamber of Commerce. They had the Hispanic Political Voice to help. So all those foundations were there, and they won a lot of tough battles. They defeated the English-only bill here. They joined a DSEG federal lawsuit that ended up saving the bilingual program, ordering the school system to hire more Latino teachers and administrators. But what I find is the people who benefited from that were so self-involved in their own lives, sometimes not always negative, a lot of times just devoted to family, and their jobs, but didn't seem to want to spend the time to continue that legacy, and so a lot of our organizations have floundered. Most of the clubs I talked to about the first generation have disappeared, other than two. The other ones are fighting to stay alive, and I didn't see a whole lot of involvement in the undocumented or the immigration issue, which I think our community should be just, really, really fighting for that. But when I see, we have a mayoral candidate, Tim Carrion, right now, and there's others that seem to be coming out and bringing young people along. So I feel confident that there's going to be a resurgence of that feeling, But it's been a problem. It's been a problem.
So you have experiences with Latinos that are been here for a long time and undocumented as well. What message would you give to those maybe immigrants or new people, newcomers to Lorain? What would you tell them about the city, about?
The first advice that I gave them, when I first got involved with them, they were very much in the shadows. They were afraid to go to the store. To this day, when we have functions, the women show up. The men don't come because they're afraid that they're going to, get arrested along the way. We brought them out. We suggested that you need to come out. You need to show the human side of this issue, and I think that's really important. And I think they already do the things that I think are important. They do the same thing that our first generation did. They're very clannish. They're very helpful to each other. They sacrifice for each other. If they have a little bit of money and somebody needs it, they give it to them. They go to court together. They just, so I would just tell them to, first of all, to have faith that it's going to be okay someday. They're in the right, and eventually they're going to win, and to not lose faith, and to take care of each other, and to be there for each other, and to give back. But they do those things, They're like the most active group at Sacred Heart Church. They're the most active group in supporting El Centro. They're just extremely talented. They just have so many great skills, and they just give so freely of themselves. I don't know that there's anything I can tell them. I would rather talk to the people who've been here and have benefited from the generations in the past, that those are big shoulders to stand on, and it didn't come easy. There's no doubt the African American community led the way for us. They made it easy for us. But a lot of people suffered and over the years to get the gains that we have today, and not to take that for granted, and don't think it can't change, So we need them to come out and and continue to build what was began so many years ago. I guess that's what I would say.
Well, thank you so much for this interview.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.